Press the bell icon and never miss an update from ET Auto.
Hello and welcome to ET Auto. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Felix Kuhnert, Global Leader at PwC for Automobile Practices. Welcome to ET Auto, Felix. It's really pleasure having you here today. There's a lot of excitement around the automotive industry. I think this is the best time to be around automotive industry. Can you tell us what has been the mega trends globally that you have noted that will finally trickle down into markets like India? And how do you see Indian market reflecting on?
You're absolutely right. It's really one of the most exciting times ever to be in the automotive industry. The last decade, we have seen the companies really trying to globalize, getting their production portfolio broader and broader. But now we enter into a complete new era of new mobility, which is basically driven very much by technological change and availability of new technologies, but also from other areas such as regulation and also customer behavior and customer demand. So the mega trends we see really transforming the industry is connectivity. We expect all of the vehicles which come into the market to be connected. Secondly, we see the area of electrification. So in some way, the powertrain will look different in the future going forward. We see the concept of shared mobility taking place and getting acceptance from consumers. And last but not least, which is a little bit further out there in our point of view, autonomous. Autonomous driving, so that vehicles don't necessarily need to have a driver going forward. However, having said that, that is in our point of view a little bit further out. If we take a look how these mega trends will change the industry, we believe at the end there will be a second ecosystem, which we call the robotaxi economy. And that is maybe 15 years away, but we do see already these megatrends shaping the automotive markets around the world. In my point of view, it will trickle down to the territories in a different way, depending on their infrastructure, on government regulation, on customer behavior. So we will not see one size fits all around the globe. It will differ from country to country.
Let's take one by one the mega trends that you mentioned. Let's start with connectivity. So if we talk about the trend in connectivity space, what has been the per vehicle value of connectivity in every vehicle globally and how it is progressing?
Well, the point, the real interesting question is how much money and revenue can you generate more with connected vehicles? And we see a lot of use cases being developed currently, but we see, I would say, difficulties to capitalize and earn real revenues by connecting the vehicle and providing new services, unless you come to the point where sharing drives new business models, and basically also with taking out the driver at some point, so you can spend your time in different ways while you're in the car. That will drive a new revenue game, but currently we see only limited revenues coming from the pure connectivity of vehicles.
So if we talk about electronics and connectivity, per vehicle, what would be the value of content?
We estimate that the value, the proportion of electrical components in the car further will go up. We estimate around to 18 to 25%.
18 to 25% growth you're expecting?
No, of the overall vehicle.
80 to 85% of the
and there you need to answer the question: will it include the electrical powertrain? That's not the case. So we believe that that will come on top of it. So you come up then to 70 to 80% if you go to a fully electric vehicle. Yeah.
Okay, that will be. But if we talk about ICE engine, if we talk about currently in ICE engine, what would be the value of connected content? Connected and electronics content on per vehicle?
On an ICE car?
Yeah.
I don't have this number honestly available right now.
Okay, you talked about 70 to 80% in those,
total.
When electrification happens. How much time it will take for India to reach that level, do you think it is possible for India anytime soon, or it will?
Well, I think there are a couple of factors which are limiting the speed of introduction of electric vehicles. The first is the price of the battery. So we see that all the car companies are driving investments in, and also the battery producers to build bigger plans for and researching in fields to lower the price of a battery. So that's the first. I think we have to get lower battery prices to get it really introduced on a mass basis going forward. The second interesting point is the infrastructure. So we do need to have sufficient charging infrastructure, whether it's local in the cities or whether it's along the big highways to make it happen. And that's an interesting challenge. Actually, not just in some areas of the world, it is a comprehensive challenge everywhere. And this third piece is basically consumer acceptance. Consumers need to start to have fun driving these electric vehicles.
Yeah, so they want power, they want range. These are
Yes.
two
Yeah.
constant that this consumer sees. Coming back to connected, when I talk about electronics, I talk about connected IoT and stuff like that. What kind of market size, what kind of opportunity do you assess for the component makers or the automotive makers going forward because of these two trends?
Yeah, I mean, we see currently, if we take a vehicle with a cost which is produced of around 12 to 15,000 euros in a smaller segment of premium brands, we expect this basically to increase to 15 to 16,000 euros. So that means roughly 20-25% increase over the next 5 to 7 years.
Coming back to electrification, subject of electrification, you have observed this transformation in Europe. You have seen in Norway, you have seen in China. India is about to take off in that direction. What is your prediction? What is your forecast? How will the market shape up? What will be the direction? Which segment will be first, and how it will trickle down?
I mean, speaking for electrification for Germany, this is a market I know best. We expect now, after subsidies didn't work so well in Germany, we believe that fleets, in particular of company fleets, will adopt electric vehicles. However, we also believe that given that these fleet vehicles will be then pushed into the used car market at some point, this will then also drive consumer acceptance. However, I do see a big hurdle when we talk about the battery, because if a customer expects that even cheaper battery will, with more, I would say, a range will come out soon, and he needs to buy the battery today, he might postpone his purchase because he's waiting for the cheaper or like better performing battery. So the car makers will need to give some kind of leasing or upgrading options to their customers to really accelerate the acceptance of electric vehicles.
So it's a strong belief that Chinese market has grown in electrification because of subsidies. Now the subsidy is going to go away in some way in China also. Do you think it is going to have a major impact, and what would be the reflection on countries like India, where the Chinese car makers are trying to entrench?
I mean, what we see after subsidies run out, we normally see a dip for a little bit, but then normally if the car market was on a growth path, such as in China, it moves back to growth. So in our point of view, in particular in China, we have seen 140 electric vehicle innovations at the last auto show in Beijing. 120 approximately were from Chinese car makers. or startups. So I think not all of them will survive. But it shows that there's a big push in the market to make electrification happening in China. However, I would expect if the Chinese companies start to access the Indian market with vehicles, they might come with traditional models at the same time. So with traditional combustion engines, and would offer maybe, because they are already able to provide this car both to the customer.
So they will tag along both the options. That's what
I would assume that, given the maturity of the Indian market. I mean, you have almost all the sales currently are IC combustion engines. So I would expect that they would then enter with the traditional and maybe offer on the side also.
How do you look at the Chinese companies being very aggressive in overseas global market? Like look at NIO. It is trying to entrench into US. Look at Geely, they are trying to buy companies in Germany and everywhere. How do you see it shaping going forward? What kind of dominance you see of Chinese player, and how it will reflect on the global market?
Yes, I mean, we have to accept that the world's biggest,
because they have other strength of lithium also, because so
yes.
How do you see this shifting?
They have a clear industry policy, a roadmap how to go to electrification, on how to secure the resources to go there, on how to put regulation out to make sure the customers in this also driving in the cities start to quicker adopt the technology. So they have a real industry plan behind this. If you ask me about globally, we have seen the Japanese, Korean car makers in 70s, 80s coming or globalizing their footprint and their presence, and it was always similar patterns. And it was the same with the Chinese. They already tried to come to Europe, and they failed.
But this time they are coming back room. So
now they are coming also with a much better quality, and they have learned to build really, I would say, satisfactory quality vehicles, enticing some of the customers from their value perspective. So I think that's we have to accept, and that will then play out in some of the markets. And I might see, I could see them also gaining market share then at some point in India.
So how do you see, basically, how will it impact your German players like Mercedes? They have already taken a 9% market share, stake in Daimler. I think Geely chairman becomes one of the largest stakeholders. Similarly, there are a lot of component manufacturing space where they have got a good stake. So how will it reflect in future? Because in Europe you don't have much of lithium, you don't have much of cobalt. So these guys are going to have a complete monopoly kind of thing in next 10 to 20 years. Do you think that?
No, because I think the car industry is a very competitive industry. And at the end, it's also a very complex product, which is engineered in very challenging environments. So I foresee that the Germans will try to continue the wave of premium, but also the wave of, I would say, driving the digital transformation of the industry. I mean, you see it, just was announced the merger of Daimler and BMW for their mobility services. I believe the premium car makers also still have, I would say, a technology leap compared to others. But you're absolutely right. To go directly now to electric vehicles in China takes away a little bit of competitive advantage the German industries had in combustion engines over the past.
So let me come to this point again. Germany is good at technology, but as you mentioned, China is also gearing up in terms of technology also. So this is one side that where China is now competing. So it will have certain impact on the German and European car maker. Going forward, there's another threat, that is that a completely different market is coming up in terms of when it comes to shared mobility. So how do you see the OEMs playing on the right track so that they are relevant and they grow? To who are those people? What are those strategies that will play positively going forward?
We see a second ecosystem, mobility ecosystem developing besides the privately owned, even maybe self-driven car. We see an ecosystem developing, which we see around the concept of robo-taxis.
Do you see OEMs coming in a strong collaboration with these taxi ride hailing and shared mobility, or they can start their own, or how do you see it panning out?
Yeah, I see it planning out in a way that they already started to invest and play and achieve experience in this game. You will need to have licenses for your robo-taxi fleets in the country, but also in specific cities. And so I think they are all making their homework to play there. And from the side into this ecosystem is also coming new companies, new players like Uber. And so we cannot say who will win this, I would say, new ecosystem competition, because it's still a little bit further away. But we do see that some of the automakers are heavily investing in this. They are also acquiring a lot of startups in the current process to gain new competencies. But it will be also regional by regional competition.
So there are a lot of startups are coming in this space, and looking at companies like Tesla, which has dethroned even Ford when it comes to value. How do you see it 10 years, the challengers versus the traditional players, how many of them you think will survive, and how will the market look like?
I mean, we see patterns where companies take more a kind of a wait and see mode and feel strong enough at a later stage to come into the game. We see companies who are really aggressively trying to be ahead of the curve when it comes to being part of this digital transformation. We will see new players. And if you think about that robotaxi economy, and that's why is this economy, this new kind of ecosystem, so interesting for all participants in the market, also tech players, is basically you spend time with your customer, with the human being. While he is traveling from A to B, you can basically interact with him. So that's why we call it's the fifth screen economy. And during this time, you can sell him services, you can interact with him, you can use your algorithm to provide him great new products, and which might be of interest for him. So I will see there a second arm of mobility developing, where we will see completely new alliances, completely new ecosystem. And a good example also again is the new joint venture regulation in China. You don't have from 2022 on to have a Chinese joint venture partner for production. You can have non-joint venture partner. You can have it in different industries. You can partner with Alibaba or whoever. We see the first reactions of the car makers of finding new alliances in preparation for that new regime. So that will be an interesting thing to observe.
Do you think the German influence that we had for decades or century will survive after this transformation, or you think China is going to give you a strong competition?
I believe strong in co-opetition at this point, because the car will be a very complex vehicle going forward. In particular, if you think about autonomous and all kind of software and camera systems and sensor systems you have to combine. So in my point of view, there will be always a very strong foothold for good engineering and excellent engineering. So that's therefore I'm confident that the German car industry will be there.
I hope it remains that way. Thank you so much, Felix, for talking to
You're
ET Auto.
welcome. Thank you.